Good evening and thanks for tuning in to Undercurrent, Perth's only local current affairs show. We're really happy to have you with us this evening and we're looking forward to bringing you the stories that affect you. Tonight we've got another great show lined up for you and we're coming to you from beautiful Cottesloe. WA's steel industry is currently under threat from overseas manufacturers. Journalist Rachel O'Rourke spoke to Australian Steel Institute State Manager James England about the impact of the big companies sending their orders overseas.
The Australian Steel Institute State Manager James England says the government needs to change their attitude and accept it's part of their job to monitor the industry.
At the moment, they seem to have gone to sleep. It comes and goes with governments. Sometimes they try a little bit and then they lose interest and move on to something else. This needs to be hardwired into what the government does all day, every day to make sure that West Australians get what they deserve from these resources projects.
Well, WA Labor's policy is related to taking the whole industry, the whole business of Western Australia seriously, and our policy is to actually make sure, as an opposition, that we keep the government held to account to make sure that they are developing a sustainable economy for Western Australia, not just in this boom, but in the boom after the next.
Many professionals in the steel fabrication business are worried about the industry and where it's headed, with many of the local factories running at less than 35% of local workers.
Local content policies in the past have been pretty much just words on paper. They need to be backed up by proper ways of measuring local content so that everybody knows what's happening in the state, so that everybody can see how much work is actually being done here and how much is being done offshore.
Well, principally it's not the fact that the workshops aren't full, which is clearly what the Premier had promised, but what it also is the fact that the forward orders are not as healthy as they look. So the trend line for these businesses, the trend line is down on future orders, and that's a really worrying sign.
Well, every other country that's got massive amounts of resources, like Western Australia has, they really look after their local industries and they make it a condition of doing business that the local people get a benefit, not in terms of royalties, but in terms of jobs and skills and investment opportunities.
Worries about what could happen to the industry in the next decade include that of a skill shortage in the WA steel sector and multinational companies taking most of the profit out of WA.
Well, what's actually at stake is twofold. One is we're going to dumb down the skills base of this state. Our capacity to undertake the higher end work will actually decline over time. That will reduce the level of work that our industry can undertake and become a strategic weakness for us to be able to deliver a sustainable economic future.
Certainly the government's working towards building the skills requirements, but unfortunately they're working against it at the same time by approving too many projects at once. The companies that come to this state to do these projects are multinational companies. They're not West Australian businesses. It's in their interest to look after their bottom line and they play by the rules according to their interpretation of them. It's up to our government to make sure that those rules benefit the people of Western Australia, not the multinational companies.
Well, it's harder and harder to get a job, to be honest. Yeah. I've had about 7 jobs in 15 years, but each time it was quite hard to get another job.
Eastern states should be second on the list and then overseas people should come after that. But for me, it's just disappointing that all our good work goes overseas. We find a lot of stuff comes from overseas, gets here, doesn't come up to scratch. We've got to pull it all apart and do it again.
Oh, I reckon they should have a steel mill in Australia, produce steel, especially in WA, instead of sending our minerals overseas. And like we have to buy our steel back. And lose a lot of jobs doing that for starters. So.
We are at the cutting edge. A lot of the workshops in the southern suburbs of WA are very high tech. Those are the ways that we are competing right now. We've got a world-class industry. It's up to our government to make sure that continues.
I'd like to see it keep on going. Like apprenticeships are getting more and more scarce, so I'd like to see the government offer more apprenticeships in this industry.
Over the next few episodes, we'll be bringing you a number of interviews with Perth politicians and academics discussing corporate responsibility. Tonight, Joe speaks to Roger Cook, Deputy Leader of the ALP Party and member for Kwinana, about native title and corporate responsibility and how it relates to people today.
I believe that you've got an interest with native title and therefore have quite a strong opinion where this is concerned.
Look, my formative experiences in relation to corporate social responsibility was working for Aboriginal land councils who are involved in native title and helping them negotiate positions and outcomes with mining companies who wanted to mine on their lands. So a real key outcome is how those mining companies actually conducted themselves to produce outcomes which benefited the Aboriginal community and respected their culture.
What about big industry throwing around their weight, and particularly stakeholders at the top concerned about bottom value?
Well, that's the interesting thing about corporate social responsibility. It impacts on big players and small players alike. And it's by people being actively engaged in the marketplace and in the activities of business which puts pressure upon businesses to conduct themselves in an appropriate manner. So what we actually see in some cases is big businesses who have the resources actually do manage to conduct themselves in a manner which is, in my experience, sensitive to the needs of native title holders.
How can an ordinary member of the public track the progress of initiatives in place?
Well, and that's what the role of non-government organisation and pressure groups, and that's the important role that they play. By people on an ongoing basis taking note of how these companies are conducting themselves, informing the community and allowing people therefore to hold those companies to account is really what corporate social responsibility hinges on.
And can you give an example of a company that has been under recent scrutiny and how they've handled it?
Well, the classic example is the response from Nike when it was brought to the community's attention about their work practices at their factories in Asia. You saw a movement back in North America and other developed countries which put pressure on that company to change its business activities and its business decisions in a way which produced a different social outcome. So here you have a company that's having to respond to someone other than its corporate supervisors like government and other forms of accountability, having to respond to a group other than just its customers, but actually responding to a broader group of stakeholders who have a view about how they operate.
Do you think that there's enough education and awareness around corporate social responsibility?
Well, there's much more than there used to be. There's more than there was yesterday, and there'll be more tomorrow. And that's the nature of corporate social responsibility. It's because companies now operate under the glare of public scrutiny through modern communication, through modern social movements, that they're actually being held to account. For instance, many years ago, a Japanese boat operating in the wide oceans hunting whales would not have had a single point of scrutiny in terms of their activities. Now, it's worldwide media focused, and that's the nature of the new age of communication, and that's why companies now have to operate in an international environment.
This week, Nick Hayes sat down with the Global Good Foundation founder Tenille Bentley to chat to her about her work with children affected by domestic violence.
What is the Global Good Foundation doing to help those that are suffering from domestic violence?
We've got a number of things that we're doing at the moment. The core, I suppose, business goal to the Global Good Foundation is that we want to set up an education centre, firstly in WA and then around Australia, for people impacted by domestic violence. We also want to be able to provide entrepreneurial opportunities at the tail end of that, and also work placement opportunities at the tail end of our program. We take them away for a 60-day program. We educate them on very deep behavioural based methods, education on why they got in the situation they did in the first place, how that happened and what does it mean for them, and how can we now change their situation. We then sort of rebuild those building blocks, and then they have two options. They can either go back into the workforce, where we will, through planning and processing and matching them up with the right mentor programs, we would put placement back into the workforce, or they could go into our Entrepreneur Centre and then look to start their own business with micro-lending and also support with a business coach and a life coach. And also with some of our national scholarship programs, we are really testing how they shift from being, in their mind, a victim to being empowered. How do we do that in the quickest way possible?
Why do you think the media doesn't cover domestic violence as much as it should?
It's a funny thing. It's because they don't want to polarise the situation. A bit like the suicide, you know, they don't want to polarise it. But in some ways, I think it goes against it. I mean, I know again firsthand that I've been told by some media people that I've had interviews with before in the past, is that they won't, even if domestic violence comes across their table, they will not look at it.
Is domestic violence as rife through Western Australia as it is around the rest of the country and around the world?
On average, about 50% of people in our community are impacted by domestic violence, and that's proving to be, you know, a result of the community not speaking about it enough. It's not supported enough, so it's really something that we need to sort of get together and really educate our community about.
50%, I mean, they're big numbers.
Big numbers, yeah.
Why isn't the media covering more of this issue?
Fear of loss, fear of financial loss, shame. There's a lot of behavioural reasons why it's not getting spoken about. I mean, people don't want to talk about it because they don't want to screw up their family. They don't want to, I suppose, dishonour their family. So it's deeper than just, talking about it. It's actually, for people to talk about it is a really big deal.
Tenille, let's get on to something a little different. You are the CEO and MD of Socialite Media. Tell us a little bit more about it.
At Socialite Media, we're positioning ourselves to be Australia's leading social media solutions provider. So by way of providing a social media personal assistant to organisations that just don't have time to do social media.
You've been an inspiration. What do you love about Western Australia?
Well, there's many things I love about Western Australia, but I suppose one of the big things that stand out is the community aspect, the people, the support, that small business supports small business. The support amongst women as well, I think, is really important in WA. I think we've got this camaraderie between, women who are starting up business, and I would not have been able to do it without that kind of camaraderie and support and just positivity. So, yeah, it's great.
Good
Love it.
Thanks, Tenille.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick and Tenille. We're going to have a quick break now. Stay where you are. We'll be right back with more Undercurrent. Welcome back. Let's get right back into it. Young Perth filmmaker Daniel Tenille delves into the hidden side of World War II for WA's Italian immigrants in his debut feature movie, Restare Unity.
Fremantle is a place known for its distinct cultural feel, much of which is due to many of the Italian immigrants who moved here during the early 1900s, including my grandparents. But for many of those immigrants, it hasn't always been an easy ride, and a new independent film is set to tell that very story. Restare Unity, which means stick together, will reveal the darker side of Australia's involvement in World War II, when Italian leader Benito Mussolini declared war on the Allies, making Australia and Italy enemies. So Daniel, what is your film about?
Well, Restare Unity is basically about the internment camps in 1940, between 1940 and 1942, in Western Australia, in Rottnest, Fremantle and Harvey. They took about 4,000 Italian men away and took them from their families and put them in these working camps. So the short film is sort of one boy's experience of that time.
Why was it important to make this film?
Well, it's been sort of in my head for a long time. I mean, my nonna always used to go on about stories, how hard it was when he came out to Australia and this and that. And then actually in a uni class a couple of years ago, I was doing a documentary class, and someone mentioned something about the internment camps, and I just couldn't believe it happened. I never even learnt about it or heard about it. And it just kind of inspired me to sort of tell the story. I mean, no one really knows that it happened. How did you go about doing your research? Research, I went down to Harvey, drove down there a lot of times, went through the shrine there, and went through, they've got a lot of history there. They've got all newspaper articles from the 1940s and photos, and just basically went through all of that, went through what little literature there is available. There's a couple little books written by nuns and stuff like that, but there's not really much out there at all, so it's been quite hard.
How was the film funded?
Basically a lot of fundraising and our pockets. There was about 5 or 6 of us main crew, and we fundraised about half the budget, and the rest of it just came from our pockets. And sometimes I really feel like my nono is there sort of watching down on me and, you know, looking after the film, because it really has been just so amazing.
So the main actor in the film, Frank Fazio, is a very familiar face down here in Fremantle. How'd you come across him?
We actually study performance at Curtin University together. So that's how I met him, and actually the story, when I actually wrote the script, I actually had him in mind when I was writing the script the whole time. I pretty much wrote the script with him in mind to play the part, so I was very lucky when I pitched it to him and he said yes, because otherwise I don't think anyone would have done a good job. I can't imagine anyone else in the part.
So you have a very exciting premiere coming up. Tell us about that.
February 23 will be the premiere. We've got a big cinema in Fremantle at Hoyts. There's going to be you know, drinks, food and alcoholic drinks. We've got an Italian singer, local singer, Amanda Canzorlo. She's very talented. She'll be singing an Italian song. Got a lot of people coming down to watch our film, and we've sold all the tickets, but we've decided, because there's just a huge interest in seeing the film, to put on a second show on the Thursday the 24th. So basically we'll be doing 2 shows in a row, so that'll be the same deal on the 24th, so we've got more tickets to sell to that.
Subiaco Oval has long been the home of football in WA and has hosted many of Perth's premier events. Hi, I'm Josh Roden. Today I'll be hitting the streets to ask whether people support the new plans for a stadium in Perth, or whether they think the whole issue should be given the boot.
Yeah, a decent stadium. I'm sure tourists will come to that, you know, interested in AFL and, you know, getting to see the first game and all this, you know. Yeah.
I think it does, yes. The population has outgrown the Subiaco Stadium, so I think we need something slightly bigger.
Look at West Coast, for example. You know, you got people waiting on the you know, the membership waiting list for many years. So I think we definitely could do with a bigger stadium to support more international events as well.
I think that if it ends up being a good thing to have more events, maybe like if we're able to have more things in Perth, that'd be good, because not much happens really.
Do you think that they should redevelop the Subiaco Oval, or perhaps build a new stadium altogether?
I'd like to see it where it is, but redeveloped really. It's a main focus for Subiaco. I think if that went away, you know, it wouldn't be the same.
Well, I guess that's something for the designers to figure out whether Subiaco Oval is possible.
It depends on where it is, I think, because if it's too far away, then, you know, not many people will go there, I reckon like just distracting in the Subi Oval as well.
Would you prefer to see the money spent on other things, such as schools or hospitals?
Well, I'm a bit of a sports fan, so I mean, to be honest, I think there's got to be enough money for both, really. I mean, yeah. I know there's always that argument, you know, where's the money better spent, but I think there's got to be enough money for both. And I think from a bit of a sports fan myself, I think it'd be a good thing to see.
Well, I think the government spent money on schools and wasted a lot of it myself. A lot of schools still don't even have air conditioning.
I think schools and hospitals are really important, but my opinion, I think the sports stadium will benefit Perth in terms of what Perth can offer the world.
It really depends, it's all relative. I guess it depends on how much they're spending on schools and hospitals at the same time. But I wouldn't be opposed to having better sports facilities that can fit more people and things. I don't think they should need to redevelop one in Subiaco.
I definitely think hospitals should take priority in WA because, you know, there's such a large waiting list and they're not in the top condition that they should be. So probably, you know, I agree with that point that they should maybe be diverted to hospitals and stuff first. But nevertheless, there's still a need for like a sports stadium.
Finally tonight, we're joined again by the member for Fremantle, Melissa Park, who argues why the government should recognise same-sex marriage.
I'm here with Federal Member of Fremantle, Melissa Park, and we're talking about same-sex marriage. Now, current policy of Labor recognises marriage between a man and a woman. What's your alternative to the new policy?
Why should same-sex couples not have the same right that I do as a heterosexual woman to choose marriage to declare their love and commitment to each other? So far in life I haven't chosen marriage, but at least I have that choice. Same-sex couples don't have that choice, and that's not fair. A society in which equality is the preeminent right is at its base a good and a fair society. And in a country that prides itself on egalitarianism and fair go, I think allowing same-sex marriage is very much in the spirit of Australia. It's also about removing discrimination. In its first term in government, the federal Labor government removed discrimination against same-sex couples in more than 80 Commonwealth laws and areas of public policy, including superannuation entitlements, taxation, access to health and welfare services. And I think removing marriage discrimination is the next logical step.
De facto relationships are recognised, but why do you think there is still an opposition against same-sex marriage?
Some people oppose same-sex marriage because they see marriage between a man and a woman as a tradition which must be upheld. But as we know, traditions change over time. There are some matrimonial traditions like payment of dowries and a wife's vow of obedience to her husband, which we now regard as absurd. And there are very real-life implications involved in marriage discrimination. The Human Rights and Equal Opportunity Commission, in its inquiry into same-sex, same entitlements, heard about a lesbian couple, and one of these women was in hospital dying. Her lifetime partner was prevented by hospital staff from entering her hospital room to be with her because she was not the spouse. And so that woman died alone while her partner had to sit outside in the corridor. And to this day, that woman is in great distress, knowing that her partner died without her comfort and without knowing that she was there with her.
Under freedom of religion, shouldn't these religions be allowed to continue their practices as specified in these beliefs, practices, customs and ideologies?
Absolutely. We have full freedom of religion here in Australia. But removing discrimination in marriage against same-sex couples does not in any way impact upon people's right to practice their religion. Extending marriage to same-sex couples does not in any way lessen the value of marriage. Indeed, the fact that many same-sex couples wish to marry only reinforces the strength and the value and the relevance of marriage as an institution in our society.
What are you going to do in terms of same-sex marriage to make it happen in Australia?
Well, I'll be working within the party to see a change in the policy, and given the strong support within the Australian community for a change in policy, I think that we will see that. There's a Labor Party conference happening at the end of the year, and I think this issue will be well and truly debated there and hopefully resolved positively.
Good luck and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, my pleasure.
That's all we've got time for tonight. If you'd like to get involved with Undercurrent, or you've got a story that you think we should cover, please get in touch with us here at West TV. This is your show about your city, and we'd love to hear from you. Your feedback really is a very important part of how we put this show together. Why not visit our website at wtvperth.com.au. We'll be back again next week, and we'd love to have your company then. I'm Jason Jordan. Good night.